Need to check the names list carefully before writing. Names already used. From file: Lauren, Daniel, Patricia, Rosie, Naomi, Marcus, Diane, Gloria, Mia, Cassie, Helen, Eleanor, Claire, Brianna, Audrey, Sandra, Vera, Gerald, Ivy, Philip, Fiona, Owen, Nora, Renata, Joelle, Celeste, Serafina, Winifred, Rhett, Tessa, Derek, June, Stella, Tatum, Barrett, Rhett, Tessa, Derek, June, Stella, Tatum, Barrett, Rhett, Conrad, Trevor, Simone, Brooke, Ren, Emmett, Constance, Lynette, Adrian, Harrison, Penny, Petra, Ruth, Callie, Miles, Dottie, Hank, Veronica, Ronnie, Greta, Evelyn, Theo, Kay, Thomas, Zoe, Nadia, Isabel, Keely, Dex, Lottie, Raymond, Margot, Bennett, Colette, Adelaide, Lorraine, Franklin, Renko, Bennett, Kellett, Adelaide, Lorraine, Franklin, Sabrina, Darlene, Wesley, Priya. New names I'll use: Natasha, narrator / wife; Colton, husband; Cheryl, mother-in-law; Becca, friend; Alden, lawyer. All absent from the list. I remember the day I signed the check like it was yesterday. My hand didn't even shake. I trusted him that completely. My husband and I had been married for 4 years when he first brought up the idea of opening his own physical therapy clinic. He'd been working under someone else for 6 years, long hours, someone else's name on the door. Someone else's name on the door. Someone else cashing in on his patients' loyalty to him specifically. He was good at what he did, really good. The kind of therapist patients drove 40 minutes each way to see even when there was a practice 5 minutes from their house. So when he laid out his business plan on our kitchen table one Sunday morning, I sat down and I read every page. I was 31. I had spent the previous 8 years building a career in pharmaceutical sales. I traveled, I hit my numbers, I saved aggressively because my mother raised me to believe a woman's financial independence was not optional. It was armor. By the time my husband presented me with that plan, I had $340,000 sitting in accounts I had built entirely on my own. Before the marriage, during the marriage, money I earned at 5 a.m. flights, and late-night client dinners and commissions I negotiated hard for. I gave him $310,000 of it. I want you to understand that number, not because I want sympathy, but because I want you to understand what kind of belief I had in this man, what kind of future I thought we were building. I kept $30,000 for myself as an emergency cushion because even in love, some part of me remembered my mother's voice. I signed my name on a joint investment agreement that his attorney drew up. An attorney, by the way, who turned out to be his college roommate, a detail I filed away as nothing at the time. The clinic opened 14 months later. I attended every planning meeting I was invited to, which was maybe 4 out of the dozens that happened. I helped pick the logo colors. I helped him rehearse his speech for the bank loan presentation. I stayed up until 2 in the morning, proofreading the lease contract, when his eyes were too tired to catch the errors I found on page 7 and page 12. I was his partner. I believed I was his partner. I believed I was his partner. The clinic's soft opening was on a Thursday in October. I found out it happened because my husband came home that evening smelling like champagne and told me it went well. I said, "What went well?" He said, "The soft opening. We did a small thing, just the staff, nothing big." I remember I was standing at the stove. I turned the burner off. I turned around and I looked at him and I said, "You had the opening today." He said, "It was nothing, babe. Just internal. The staff wanted to celebrate. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it." I nodded. I said, "Okay." But something in my chest went very quiet and very cold in a way I had learned to pay attention to over the years. His mother called me 2 days later. My mother-in-law and I had never been close. That is the polite way to say it. The honest way to say it is that she had decided before she ever really knew me that I was not what she had envisioned for her son. Too independent, I think, was her actual problem with me, though she dressed it up in other language. She once told my husband that I was a lot to handle, as if being a woman with opinions and a salary was a personality flaw. She had a way of looking at me during family dinners that reminded me of someone reading a return policy. She called me to let me know that the grand opening, the real one, the public one, with the ribbon and the photographer and the catering, had been scheduled for the following Saturday, and that she had, in consultation with my husband, decided the event would be best kept to close family and a curated list of professional contacts. I said, "I'm sorry?" She said, "It's a professional event, we want the right image." And she trailed off in that practiced way she had of leaving the insult implied rather than stated. I said, "I invested over $300,000 in that clinic." She said, "And that's very generous of you, but this is about the clinic's professional brand going forward." I hung up the phone. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. Not crying. Just sitting. Thinking about what my mother used to say about armor. I called my husband. He didn't pick up. I texted him, "Call me when you have a moment." He texted back 40 minutes later, "At a meeting, everything okay?" I wrote back, "We'll talk tonight." He wrote, "Sounds good, love you." He came home at 8:30. I had made dinner and I had set the table and I had spent the previous 3 hours being extremely calm and extremely clear-headed in a way that, looking back, should have alarmed him. He sat down across from me and I handed him a plate and I said, "Your mother called today about the grand opening." He said, "Yeah, I was going to tell you about that." I said, "Were you?" He said, "It's really a professional event, babe. I just thought it would be less complicated if it stayed to people in the industry. You know how my mom gets when she's trying to manage the optics." I said, "I gave you $310,000. He went quiet. I said, "I would like you to explain to me how the woman who funded the majority of your clinic's startup costs does not qualify as close family or a professional contact." He started talking. He said things about branding and first impressions and his mother's connections in the local medical community, and how I would be there for every milestone after this. This was just one small ribbon cutting. It didn't mean anything. I listened to all of it. And then I said, "Okay." And I meant it in a way he did not understand yet. The grand opening happened on a Saturday. I know because I saw the photos. Not because he showed me. He didn't mention it at all that morning when he left. Kissed me on the cheek. Said he'd be back by 3. I saw the photos because his mother posted them publicly on her Facebook page that afternoon. Tagged the clinic's new Instagram. Captioned it, "So proud of my son and his incredible team, and the wonderful family and friends who made today so special." I was not in a single photograph. I looked through all 47 of them. He came home at 5:30, not 3, and he seemed in good spirits and he said it went beautifully. And he hugged me. And I let him, and I said that's great. 9 days later he called me at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday. He said, "Hey, I need you to transfer some money into the clinic account. The equipment vendor invoices are due and we're running a little short this cycle." I said, "How much?" He said, "About $28,000, just to bridge the gap. The insurance reimbursements are coming in next month." I said, "I'm sorry. Where are the operating funds from the initial investment?" He said, "They've been used, babe. We've been running for 2 months. It costs money to—" I said, "My money was invested to capitalize the business, not to be a perpetual operating line of credit." He said, "It's not that big a deal. It's just a bridge." I said, "I have to call you back." I called Becca. Becca had been my best friend since our sophomore year of college. She was also, by a stroke of luck that had never felt more relevant, a forensic accountant. I told her what was happening. She said, "Send me everything you have, the investment agreement, the business plan, the bank statements you can access." I sent her everything I had, which, it turned out, was not very much because I had been removed as an authorized viewer on the clinic's joint account 2 months earlier. I discovered this when I tried to log in and the portal showed me an error message. I had assumed it was a technical issue. I had not pushed. I should have pushed. While Becca was going through what I'd sent her, I drove to the clinic. I had never not been welcome there. I walked through the front door and the receptionist, a young woman I'd met twice at dinners, looked up and her expression did something very small and very fast that I filed away. My husband came out from the back hallway and he smiled and he said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I said, "I was in the neighborhood. I wanted to see the place now that it's up and running." He showed me around. It was nice, clean, modern, well-equipped. $310,000 of my money on the walls and the floors and the equipment. A framed photo on the reception desk of my husband and his mother at the grand opening, both of them beaming. Not a single photo of me anywhere. I saw something on his desk when we passed his office. An envelope, open, with a return address from a law firm I didn't recognize. I noted the name. I looked up the firm that evening. Family Law. I called Alden the next morning. Alden was an attorney I'd been referred to by a colleague years ago. One of those names you store in your phone for a reason you hope never arrives. I told him everything. I told him about the investment, the agreement, the account access removal, the envelope on the desk. He said, "Do you still have the original investment agreement?" I said yes. He said, "Do not move any money. Do not transfer anything. Do not respond to any financial requests in writing or verbally without consulting me first." I said, "Understood." What came out over the following 3 weeks was not a surprise exactly. It was more like watching a photograph develop. Each piece of information that surfaced was something I had sensed in some formless way and had talked myself out of trusting. My husband had, 6 weeks before the soft opening, added a second name to the clinic's primary operating account. Not a business partner. Not an accountant. A woman I had never heard him mention. When Alden's office requested documentation through the proper channels, we learned that this woman had been depositing money from the clinic account into a personal account every month for 5 months. I found out she was pregnant from a text message he accidentally sent to me instead of her. He realized within about 30 seconds and sent a follow-up that said, "Ignore that, wrong thread," but I had already read it. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Target for about 25 minutes after that. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat there and I thought about the version of myself 8 years ago who had decided that this man was worth building a life around. I thought about 5 a.m., flights and late-night client dinners and the commission checks I had saved instead of spent. I thought about page 7 and page 12 of the lease contract I had stayed up until 2 in the morning to proofread for him. Then I drove home, and I made myself dinner, and I called Alden. The conversation with my husband happened 4 days later, when he called me again about the $28,000. He said, "I really need you to move on the transfer. The vendor is following up daily." I said I spoke with my attorney. Silence. I said I'm not transferring anything. "And I'd like you to know that we are beginning the process of recovering my initial investment per the terms of the agreement, which your attorney drafted, and which is quite clear on the conditions of dissolution." He said, "What are you talking about? This is our money." I said, "It was my money. It was always my money. I invested it under specific contractual terms. Those terms have been violated in ways I think you already know about." His voice changed. He said, "You don't have to do this. We can figure this out." I said, "Your mother told me I wasn't close family." I took her at her word. "I'm handling this as a business matter." And then I said the thing that I had been sitting with for 3 weeks. The thing that came out quietly and without drama because the quiet ones land harder. "I have everything, Colton. The account records, the transfers, the agreement, the timeline. My attorney has copies of all of it. I also have the text you sent me by mistake. So before you decide how you want to proceed, I'd think carefully." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "I never meant for any of this to." I said, "I know. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. You didn't plan it, you just kept making choices and assuming I wouldn't notice or wouldn't act. That's not malice, that's something worse. That's how little you thought of me." I hung up. The legal process took 7 months. It was not clean or simple or cinematic. It was paperwork and depositions and 2 sessions of mediation where my mother-in-law sat across from me and said things through her attorney that I will not repeat here. It was expensive and draining, and there were nights I drove home from Alden's office and sat in my driveway for 10 minutes before I had the energy to go inside. But the investment agreement held. Alden had flagged early on that the terms were specific enough and the violations documented enough that the recovery process, while contested, was achievable. The unauthorized account access, the secondary signatory added without my knowledge or consent, the funds diverted, all of it created a paper trail that made the other side's position very difficult to sustain. I recovered $271,000, not the full amount, but more than anyone initially told me to expect. I filed for divorce the same week the settlement was finalized. The clinic, as of the last I heard, was struggling. Without the operating capital that had been sustaining it, and with the financial irregularities now a matter of legal record, 2 of his key staff had left, and at least 1 major insurance contract had not been renewed. His mother had posted nothing publicly about it in months. I stopped checking. I was 32 years old when the divorce was finalized. I had $271,000 in recovered funds, my own savings, my job, my name, and a very clear understanding of exactly what my money and my instincts were worth. I moved to a different city 6 months later, not to run, just because I had wanted to for years and there had always been a reason not to, and now there wasn't. I got an apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows actually, big ones, the kind that fills a whole wall. In the mornings the light comes in and lands on my kitchen floor and I make coffee and I think about how small fear used to make everything look. My mother called me the week I moved in. She asked if I was okay. I said, I am more than okay. She said, good. That's what the armor is for. I said, I know, Mom. I finally understand. I've thought a lot about what made Colton believe he could do what he did, not the betrayal itself. That part, as painful as it was, followed a logic I eventually understood. What I've thought about more is the assumption underneath it. The assumption that I wouldn't look too closely, that I would keep showing up, keep contributing, keep making things easier for him, and that my investment, financial, emotional, all of it, would just continue flowing in one direction without me ever demanding an accounting. That assumption didn't come from nowhere. I had spent 4 years being accommodating, not weak, not blind, but accommodating in the way you are with someone you love, in the way you tell yourself is generosity, but sometimes is just the slow surrender of your own instincts. Every time something felt slightly wrong and I talked myself out of it, I was teaching him something. I was teaching him that I would not push, and he learned that lesson very well. What I know now is that integrity isn't just about how you treat people when it's easy. It's about what you do when the math is in your favor and no one is watching. Colton made a series of choices. The account access, the second signatory, the woman he added to what was supposed to be our shared investment. And each one of those choices happened because he had calculated, consciously or not, that the benefit outweighed the risk. He was not a monster. He was a person who let himself believe that convenience was the same thing as being careful, and that I was too invested in us to ever become a problem for him. He was wrong about that last part. And I think he knew it the moment I said the words, my attorney on the phone, because that's when his voice changed, not into anger, into something smaller. The money I recovered, $271,000 out of $310,000, matters. I won't pretend it doesn't. But what I think about more, honestly, is Becca sitting at her desk going through my documents until midnight because she knew before I did how serious it was. I think about Alden's voice on the phone, steady and practical, telling me exactly what I needed to do and not do. I think about my mother's voice from 20 years ago, teaching me that financial independence wasn't a hedge against love, but a form of self-respect, that love should never require you to abandon. The people who showed up for me did so because of something I had built over years. Trust, consistency, the kind of character that means something when things go wrong. That's not luck. That's the long return on who you choose to be when no one is testing you. I'm not the same person I was before this. I'm more careful, yes, but not more fearful. There's a difference. Fear closes things down. What I have now is more like clarity, a clean understanding of what I will and will not accept, and enough respect for myself to act on it when it matters. I moved to a new city. I started over in the ways that needed starting over, and some mornings I stand at those floor-to-ceiling windows with my coffee, and I think about page 7 and page 12 of a lease contract I proofread at 2 in the morning for a man who was already planning to cut me out of the story. I did that work. I brought that care, and I get to keep that about myself regardless of what he did with it. That's not nothing. That's actually everything.